Welcome to Creating Your Logic Model, a guide for victim service providers. This CVR video will demonstrate the process of creating a program logic model. It will also touch on the benefits of having and using a logic model. Logic models are a tool to help you think through your program or project clearly. They provide a visualization that answers questions about your program, such as why, what, how, with what, and for what result. Logic models are commonly used at the planning stage when you're about to embark on a new project or initiative. They can also be used to better define or describe an existing program. For today's exercise, let's say that you are about to propose a new program. You have some idea of what you want to propose and why, but the process of mapping those thoughts onto a logic model will help clarify what you need to be successful. Let's look at a standard logic model format. While there are different variations for logic models, this format is pretty typical. You can download this template in the link provided in the video description. The first step is to spend a minute thinking about the problem you are trying to solve. Why is this program even needed? Write down your thoughts at the top. Remember, it's okay if you don't capture this exactly right the first time. As you work through this draft, you'll spend a lot of time refining different sections until it all flows together. For purposes of this video, let's say you are with a victim service organization working with survivors of sex trafficking. The problem you want to solve is that sex trafficking survivors are at risk of re-victimization due to financial instability. Next, what is the goal or maybe goals of the project? This is the solution to the problem you just identified. So in this example, the goal could be improve the financial stability of sex trafficking survivors. Note that this is the high-level goal, not the objective or activities of the program, but what you seek to accomplish. Moving across the table, reading from left to right, you spell out the logic of your plan. We're going to think about all the relevant factors for a successful program, the inputs or assets required for the project, the activities you plan to carry out, the outputs or what those activities will produce, the short-term results or outcomes for survivors, and the larger impact if you're successful. It can be easiest to start with the central columns. What are you planning to do, and what outputs and outcomes will result? Let's complete the activities column. What are the major activities of your program to support the goal of financial stability for sex trafficking survivors? There are many important elements. Perhaps you're trying to address some of these elements yourself and refer survivors to other programs for other services. The first activity could be job training. Will you be offering basic job seeker training on creating a resume, applying for jobs, interviewing, and so forth? Or do you want something more specific, such as training for particular professions? Here, let's say you will offer basic job readiness training. You realize that financial stability involves more than a job. Survivors may not have experience with opening a bank account, may not know how to compare credit card offers, or how to set a budget. So let's add personal finance classes. Many jobs have an education requirement. You may be planning to offer GED classes or assisting someone in applying to community college. Here, let's say you will partner with an agency who will provide GED training on site, and you'll also plan to provide education counseling or advising. Next, you want to take additional steps to help survivors obtain employment. Perhaps you're planning to create employment opportunities like an Etsy shop or employment in a thrift store operated by your program or something similar. Or you may be planning to network with area employers to identify job openings. Here, let's say you will network with area employers and provide job connections. In thinking this through, you remember that many sex trafficking victims have criminal records, which will be a barrier to employment. So let's add legal assistance in clearing a criminal record, or expungement. Now that you've listed your planned activities, let's move to the next category. Outputs. What will be the easily observable results of these activities? Think of outputs as indicators that you carried out your planned activities. Outputs commonly take the form of counts. Perhaps for job training and personal finance training, it's the number of individuals who complete the training. For education, let's say the output is persons who obtain a GED, or the number who receive education counseling. For job connections, the output could be the number of relationships with area employers, maybe job opportunities posted, or the number of people who get a job. Let's say we're going to count the number of jobs posted. And finally, for expungement, we'll count the number of people who receive an expungement of their record. But outputs don't really tell you whether these programs were successful in making a change, just that they were carried out. What are the outcomes you are hoping to achieve? Let's look at the short-term outcomes that are a step toward financial stability. If you are successful, what are the changes you will be able to see and measure? One outcome you might see is that survivors feel empowered to pursue their own financial stability. Maybe financial stability is demonstrated by finding and keeping a job in the short term, let's say 3 months. Or having an emergency fund could be an outcome representing financial stability. Perhaps one or more of those is unrealistic, or there are too many factors outside your control. Maybe unemployment is very high in your community, for example, or you're in a rural area with very few job opportunities. Maybe your only short-term outcome is the first, that survivors feel more empowered to pursue financial stability after improving their skills and knowledge. As you think this through, you could be adjusting the activities, outputs, or outcomes to get a workable vision for your program. But for this exercise, let's move on to the next element. Let's think about the longer-term outcomes or impact of this program if you are successful. Impacts can be very challenging to measure. When you look over the long term, it can be hard to isolate the effects of your program compared to all the other factors in the community or with the individual. But naming the long-term impact is important for your vision and to ground your program. What could you say about the long-term impact of your project if it's successful? What big changes would you expect to see? Well, for one, if you are addressing this risk factor for re-victimization, financial vulnerability or instability, a long-term impact would be fewer victims of trafficking. Another would be the improved well-being of survivors. Now that you have defined your activities and what you expect the results to be, let's look at the assets or inputs, the elements you have in place or that you will need to make this project successful. Let's say that you already have a well-trained staff. That's important. And you also have existing relationships with the local community college and local employers. All good. Are there any inputs you're missing? You'll be tempted to list funding, but right now, think about what you need that funding for. If people are taking trainings, you're probably going to need some computers or other equipment. What else? Well, if you're going to assist people with expunging their criminal records, you'll need to hire some attorneys or partner with a legal aid organization. In talking with organization staff, you may identify other assets or inputs that you have in place or that you will need. So now you have your draft logic model. You've set out your vision for this program. At this point, you may benefit from the assistance of a researcher or a training and technical assistance provider well-versed in the research. Is there research that identifies the key components to financial stability? Have you covered those components in your activities? Is there research that identifies the short-term indicators of long-term financial stability? Is having an emergency fund a key indicator? Is holding a job 3 months considered an indicator of success? Is 1 month just as good, or 6 months? Maybe the research indicates life skills training is crucial for success to help with goal setting or other issues. Having that expertise can be helpful to identify these evidence-based links. A researcher or training and technical assistance provider can also help you identify proven programs. Are there existing personal finance curricula that have been evaluated and shown to be successful? Perhaps there's already a proven package for financial empowerment or financial stability programming for survivors. A researcher can also help you plan for data collection. What tracking mechanisms do you need to have in place to capture these outputs, and how will you define the data? What about these outcomes? How will you stay in touch with survivors to measure whether they've held a job for at least 3 months? What will count for an emergency fund? Is it realistic to try to capture either of those data points? So it can be very valuable to have this assistance as you finalize your logic model. Now that you have your logic model, how can it help you? Well, you've already benefited just from the process of thinking this through. You have a clear depiction for your expectations for this project. But there are other benefits. You can use it to identify your funding needs and clearly explain to funders why you need their support. You can use it for employee onboarding and staff training to make sure everyone understands how the project is expected to work. Having a logic model can also be helpful if you decide to evaluate your program. You will have already done the work of identifying the key elements. You will know what you are evaluating, the outcomes you intended, and you will have started to gather supporting data. You can also use it for ongoing program development. As your data start to come in and you look to see whether the program is functioning as you thought and achieving the outcomes you wanted, you have a framework to think about what needs to be adjusted. Maybe you have an opportunity to add job skills training in healthcare or data management. Maybe you find you need to add assistance in applying for public benefits. Let your logic model develop along with your experience and understanding. Now it's time for you to create your own logic model for a program or project. Click on the resources listed in the video description, or visit the Center for Victim Research at victimresearch.org for more.